Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something pretty fundamental, actually, something you see every day, but it's changing in some really interesting ways
Yeah.
based on the material you shared. We're talking about the front yard.
That's right.
Forget just, the basic lawn and a path. We're exploring how it's being transformed.
Exactly. Your sources really show this shift pretty clearly. It's not just about curb appeal anymore, is it?
No.
We're starting to see the front yard as like a proper extension of our living space, a real part of our daily lives.
Absolutely. So our aim with this deep dive is to really kind of dig into what makes a front yard not just look good, but feel memorable, experiential even.
Yeah.
That phrase kept popping up in your sources, didn't it? Crafting an immersive, multi-sensory experience. It really makes you rethink the whole entrance to your home.
It does. And what's fascinating is how that front yard sort of sets the tone for everything else.
Right. The first impression.
It's a first encounter, yeah. And the material really stresses that its job is, well, way more than just getting you to the door. We're talking about creating a genuinely welcoming feeling, something that actively pulls you in, rather than just being a pathway.
Okay, so let's start to maybe unpack some of the actual pieces that make up this experiential front yard. One thing that jumped out was curated walkways and greenery.
Yes,
It's not just a slab of concrete, it's making the path itself part of it all.
precisely. Lining those paths with like lush, vibrant plants completely changes what could be a pretty boring walk.
Yeah.
It makes it more engaging for your senses even before you get inside. That really adds to that multi-sensory thing we were talking about.
And it's not just stuff on the ground either. Your sources mention vertical gardens becoming more popular.
Oh yeah.
That seems like a pretty clever way to add impact, maybe especially if you don't have a huge amount of space. What's the thinking there?
Well, vertical gardens are a great example of that intentional design. They add layers, texture, and they bring plants right up to eye level. It boosts that feeling of being sort of enveloped by nature as you approach the house.
Then there was this idea of designer seating, which sounds, well, a bit more serious than just a porch chair.
Right.
The sources talked about sculptural benches, low lounge chairs, even like artisanal stools. It kind of reframes using the front yard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What's the point of putting seating right out front?
That's a really good point. The sources suggest it's a very deliberate invitation.
An invitation.
Yeah, think about it. A really well-placed, maybe unusual bench might just make you pause for a second, right?
Okay.
It turns what's normally just a space you walk through into somewhere you might actually stop and, take a breath. That shift from just passage to potential interaction, that's a really key idea here.
And it's not just the furniture, but the actual materials used everywhere else, too. There was big emphasis on natural stuff, wood, stone, ceramic tiles. That seems important for the overall feel.
Oh, absolutely. Those materials bring both a visual richness and a tactile one.
Tactile. You mean how they feel.
Yeah, exactly. They tend to feel more grounded, more connected to the earth. They can create a stronger sense of harmony with, the natural surroundings, which fits that whole theme of blending the building and the landscape.
I also picked up on the indoor-outdoor connection idea. Things like floor-to-ceiling windows or big sliding doors were mentioned. How does that link up with the front yard?
Well, it kind of blurs the edges, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It visually makes both the inside and the outside feel bigger. It encourages a smoother flow between them and really strengthens our connection to that front space. It stops feeling like this separate zone and more like it's all one integrated living area.
Textures seem like a big deal in the sources, too. Patterned tiles, layering plants, sculptural furniture, even outdoor art on walls. It sounds like a real effort to avoid things looking too flat.
Why is texture so important?
Texture is just vital for creating visual interest and depth. It
Yeah.
engages our sense of touch, maybe subconsciously even. By carefully layering different textures, you make the whole environment more dynamic, more engaging. It stops the front yard feeling, bland or one note. And lighting. We can't forget lighting. The sources called it an atmospheric tool, not just functional lights. Uplighting, path lights. What role does good lighting play?
Good lighting totally changes the front yard after dark.
Yeah, definitely.
Uplighting can dramatize architectural bits or really make cool plans stand out. Path lights guide you, obviously, but they also add this layer of ambiance, and safety.
True.
It basically means you can actually use and enjoy this space for longer into the evening.
And then water features came up, fountains, reflecting pools. That feels like it could really change the whole mood of a front yard.
Oh, for sure. Water elements add another sensory layer, don't they? The sound, the movement, and visually, they can be really strong focal points. They draw your eye, create a sense of calm right there at the entrance.
Okay, so we've touched on a lot of the components, but the sources also kept hammering home the importance of intentionality and curation.
Yes.
It's obviously not just chucking a few nice things together randomly. What does being intentional really mean in this context?
That's a really key distinction, I think. Intentionality means you're consciously thinking about why each thing is there.
Okay.
How does it add to the overall feeling you want? And the function. It's about, as the sources said, curating a vibe, making sure every single choice, from the type of stone for the path to the exact plants you pick, all works together to create the atmosphere you're aiming for.
And this idea of layering materials, plants, textures, maybe even different ground levels, that seems pretty central to getting that curated feel. How does layering make the design stronger?
Layering is just fundamental for creating that visual depth and avoiding that feeling of emptiness or disconnection.
Right.
Think about like soft ground cover plants softening the edge of a stone path, or taller grasses behind smaller planters. It's about building up levels of interest.
Okay.
It makes a whole space feel richer, more inviting. The sources even mention how careful layering can help carve out little seating nooks and corners you might otherwise ignore.
The designer furniture thing keeps coming back to. It's clearly not an afterthought, is it? It's a deliberate choice meant to enhance the whole front yard scene.
Yeah, the choice of furniture really sends a signal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It says, this front yard is meant for living in, for enjoying, not just for walking through quickly. And the examples they gave, those sculptural benches, the low lounges, the artisanal stools, it points towards pieces that are, beautiful and useful. They actively shape the mood and how you can use the area.
It's interesting, too, that amidst all this focus on design, there's also this thread of sustainability and low maintenance.
Yes, that's important.
It suggests there's a practical side balancing out the aesthetic goals.
Well, I think that reflects a broader awareness now, doesn't it? Environmental responsibility. Using things like drought-tolerant plants or permeable pavers doesn't just help the planet, it also cuts down on how much work is needed.
Right. Less watering, less mowing, maybe.
Exactly. So homeowners can actually enjoy their front yards without feeling like they're constantly doing chores.
Now, beyond the look and the practicality, the sources also talked about how these front yards can be a reflection of personality and even how they contribute to the community. How does my front garden sort of reach beyond my own fence?
Well, because it is so visible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's public facing.
Right. So it naturally becomes a way for homeowners to show their style to the whole neighborhood. It adds to the street's character. It can even kind of create connection by making the street feel more welcoming, more engaging for people walking by.
Ah, interesting point.
And the sources mentioned it's a space where you might try bolder things, design-wise, than maybe you'd risk indoors, like huge planters or really bright chairs.
Right, because it's outdoors, maybe the rules feel different. Sort of, yeah. And there was also that point about blending materials and transitions, mixing warm and cool things, thinking about how different zones connect. Why does that matter?
That interplay, say, between the warmth of wood and the coolness of concrete or stone, it just adds complexity, visual interest,
Okay.
and thoughtful transitions, like maybe a path that curves gently or planters used to frame a view. They help guide your eye and create a more natural flow through the space. Even just which way a bench faces can change how people use the garden. I thought it was really insightful when the sources talked about considering the space at different times of day,
Yeah.
how the light hits things, the shadows. How does thinking that deeply improve the design?
That really shows a sophisticated approach, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Understanding how the sunlight moves across materials like wood grain or textured walls all through the day. It lets you create a space that's much more dynamic, visually richer. It's about creating these little moments of beauty that shift and change as time passes. So it really all comes back to this core idea. A well-designed front yard is way more than just how it looks. It's about function and feeling.
Exactly.
Creating a space that works practically, yes, but also makes you feel something positive.
Ultimately, yeah, the goal is to create a front yard that's not just nice to look at, but is genuinely welcoming, enjoyable. A place where maybe you naturally just pause for a second, take a breath.
A transition zone.
Gentle transition, between the public street and your private home.
And it was good to hear that even small front yards can be impactful. You don't need acres to do something meaningful.
Absolutely not. Smart design principles can make even a tiny front yard feel really captivating. It's all about using every inch wisely and making deliberate choices that create a sense of space and interest, whatever the actual size.
So summing up then, it really sounds like the modern front yard is, well, it's becoming a much bigger deal.
I think so.
It's not just decoration anymore. It's this intentional space that says something about us, connects us better to nature, and just makes everyday life a bit richer.
That's a perfect way to summarize it. I think the key takeaway is that thoughtful design can really elevate this often ignored area into a properly vital part of the home, offering beauty, yes, but also function and a deeper connection to, where we live.
This deep dive has definitely made me look at front yards differently, and it leaves me thinking, maybe for you listening too, how could rethinking your own front entrance actually change your daily routine, your connection to your street? What tiny change could create just a little moment of pause or enjoyment every time you come home? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.